The sound of muffled sobbing drew me toward our bedroom, like a moth to flame. Not the theatrical kind my sister-in-law Maddie specialized in, but the raw, guttural kind that makes your stomach clench. I found Eric sitting on our bed, shoulders heaving, clutching a piece of paper like it held the secrets of the universe. I'm Anna, and until that moment, I thought I had my life figured out. Neat little boxes, everything in its place. My collectible figurines lined up precisely on their shelves, my marriage solid as the oak desk in my office, my career trajectory as predictable as my morning coffee routine. "She's right about you," Eric choked out before I could reach him. God, how could I have been so blind? The letter trembled in his hands. I recognized Maddie's flowing script immediately. She always did have a flair for the dramatic, right down to her choice of lavender-scented stationery. The same kind she used to write thank you notes for Christmas presents she'd later return. What exactly am I being accused of this time? I kept my voice steady, professional, the same tone I use when dealing with difficult clients at work. You sabotaged her job interview at Maxwell and Partners." His eyes, when they finally met mine, held something I'd never seen before. Disgust. "You called them and told them about her history of workplace conflicts." A laugh escaped me, sharp and bitter. "And you believe this? They withdrew their offer this morning. She was perfect for that position, Anna. Perfect." His fingers crumpled the paper's edges. Only someone who knew about her past could have done this. Someone who had access to her previous employment records, which I don't have. "Don't lie to me." The sudden violence in his voice made me step back. "Your company handles their HR consulting. You've had it out for her since day one." The irony wasn't lost on me. 3 years of watching Maddie systematically undermine every aspect of my life, and here I stood, accused of the exact kind of manipulation she'd perfected to an art form. "Read it to me," I said quietly. The whole letter. He smoothed the paper, his hands shaking. As he read, Maddie's masterpiece unfolded, a carefully crafted narrative of persecution and betrayal, sprinkled with just enough truth to make the lies digestible. She'd always been good at that, weaving reality and fiction until even she probably couldn't tell them apart anymore. "She's destroying herself," I said when he finished. "I had nothing to do with this." Then explain how they knew about the incident at her last job, the one she only told family about. I felt something shift inside me, like tectonic plates grinding against each other before an earthquake. The incident she swore everyone to secrecy about? The one where she allegedly got fired for whistleblowing, but actually got caught falsifying reports? His head snapped up. "How did you—" "Because your father told me, Eric, last Christmas, after 3 glasses of whiskey. He was worried she hadn't changed." I moved toward my dresser, pulling open the top drawer where I kept my most precious collectibles. Just like he was worried when she sold my grandmother's brooch and claimed it was lost. That's different. She was going through a rough patch then. Was she? I lifted my limited edition Sakura figurine from its velvet nest. Empty space greeted me where its matching partner should have been. Funny how my rough patches never involve stealing from family. Eric's face flushed. "You're changing the subject." "No, I'm finally addressing it." I turned to face him fully. "Your sister isn't the victim here, Eric. She never has been, and I'm done pretending otherwise." The silence that followed felt like standing on the edge of a cliff, knowing the ground was about to crumble beneath my feet. In that moment, looking at my husband's face, I realized something that should have been obvious years ago. There would never be room for 3 people in this marriage. I sat in Sam's living room, turning my phone over and over in my hands while she paced, her bangles jangling with each sharp gesture. 3 missed calls from Eric, 7 from Helen, 1 text from Walter that simply read, "We need to talk." "Remember the first time I met Maddie?" I asked, interrupting Sam's creative string of curses about my sister-in-law. "At our engagement party? You mean when she spilled red wine on your white dress and called it an accident? Before that?" I pulled up the photo on my phone, all of us smiling, Maddie's arm wrapped around Eric's waist. She hugged me and whispered, "I always wanted a sister. I actually believed her." Sam stopped pacing. That's because you're not a sociopath. My phone buzzed again. Helen. I declined the call and opened the text from Eric instead. Family dinner tonight. Mom insists. Please come. Don't you dare, Sam warned, reading over my shoulder. I have to. I stood up, smoothing my skirt. If I don't show up, it proves everything Maddie said about me in that letter. And if you do show up, she'll find another way to twist it. That's what she does, Anna. She's been doing it for 5 years. 5 years. I remembered them all. The misunderstandings about holiday plans that left us eating alone. The tearful accusations about imagined slights. The way she'd comment on Eric's weight whenever I cooked for him. Death by 1,000 paper cuts, each one small enough to make me look petty for complaining. I need to handle this differently, I said, reaching for my bag. No more playing defense. Sam grabbed my wrist. What are you planning? Nothing yet, but I'm done being the villain in her story. The Turner house looked exactly as it always did. Pristine lawn, carefully tended roses, Helen's collection of garden gnomes standing guard. I'd always wondered if Maddie's flair for presentation came from growing up in this perfect facade. Walter opened the door before I could knock. Anna? His eyes held the same weary resignation I'd seen at Christmas. Helen's in the kitchen, Maddie's... Well, I found them all in the dining room. Helen arranging flowers like nothing was wrong, Eric staring at his phone, and Maddie, red-eyed and fragile, perched at the head of the table like a wounded queen. Anna. Helen's smile was too bright. We were just talking about how I destroyed Maddie's career? The words came out sharper than intended. Or about how I've apparently been plotting against her since day one. That's not fair, Eric started, but Maddie cut him off with a sob. I just don't understand why you hate me so much, she whispered. I've tried so hard to be your friend. I laughed. I couldn't help it. Friend? Is that what you call it? Girls, please, Helen intervened. We're family. We can work this out. Family? I pulled out my phone, fingers shaking as I pulled up the email I'd received that morning. Is that why someone using your PayPal account, Maddie, just listed my limited edition Sakura figurine on eBay? The one that mysteriously disappeared last month? The room went silent. Maddie's face didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes. Not guilt, but calculation. Oh, Anna! Her voice dripped with pity. Is that what this is about? Your little toys? She turned to Eric. I told you she wasn't ready for real responsibilities. She's still playing with dolls while I'm trying to build a career. They're collectibles, I corrected automatically, then caught myself. And you're changing the subject. Explain the PayPal listing. I have no idea what you're talking about. She reached for Eric's hand. But this obsession with blaming me for everything has to stop. It's not healthy. I watched Eric squeeze her hand back, and something inside me hardened. I thought of all the times I'd swallowed my anger, all the times I'd let her rewrite reality, because confronting her meant confronting the fact that my husband would always choose her version of the truth. You're right, I said quietly, standing up. This isn't healthy at all. I left them sitting there, walked out past Walter's troubled gaze and Helen's wilting flowers. In my car, I pulled up Sam's number and typed, "You were right, time to play offense." The notification pinged while I was cataloging my collection, documenting each piece with photographs and purchase receipts. A new listing on eBay caught my eye. Another Sakura figurine, this one from the winter collection. My hands trembled as I clicked the seller's profile. Username, Vintage Vixen 82. Location, our town. Feedback score, 147. I scrolled through their other listings. My breath caught. There, scattered among vintage jewelry and designer scarves, were 3 more of my missing pieces. The same ones I'd reported stolen to Eric last month, when he'd dismissed my concerns with a casual, "You probably just misplaced them." My phone rang. Sam. I found something, she said without preamble. Remember that job Maddie lost last year? The one she claimed was downsizing? Let me guess. Another lie? Better. I just had drinks with my cousin who works there. Apparently, Maddie got caught selling company information to their competitors. They gave her the choice to resign quietly or face charges. I stared at the eBay listings. She's been doing this for years, hasn't she? Taking things that aren't hers, twisting the truth until it breaks. Anna. Sam's voice softened. There's more. The reference check that killed her Maxwell and Partners job? It came from Helen. The world tilted sideways. What? Helen called them, said she couldn't stand by and watch another company get destroyed. A pause. Maddie knows it was her mother, Anna. She's been blaming you to punish Helen. I ended the call and sat in the growing darkness of my home office, surrounded by empty spaces where my collection used to be. The front door opened and closed. Eric coming home from another long day at work. Anna. His footsteps approached. We need to talk about yesterday. I quickly closed the eBay tabs. Yes, we do. He leaned against the doorframe, looking tired. Maddie's been crying all day. She says, I found them. I turned my laptop screen toward him. My missing pieces, the ones you said I misplaced. His expression didn't change. What are you talking about? Vintage Vixen 82. Want to guess her real name? I clicked through the listings. That's my limited edition Christmas angel from last year. And my Victorian lady with the parasol, and stop it! His voice cracked. Just stop! This obsession with your toys. They're not toys. The words exploded out of me. They're pieces of my life, Eric. Things I saved for, researched, celebrated finding. And your sister is selling them like they're worthless trinkets. You don't know it's her. I pulled up the PayPal information. Same account she used to send you money last month. Want to explain that? He went very still. How do you know about that transfer? Because I check our bank statements. $5,000, Eric. Why? She needed help with rent. He wouldn't meet my eyes. It was temporary. Like the $3,000 before that? And the $2,000 before that? I stood up slowly. How long have you been financing her lies? She's family. So am I. My voice shattered the quiet. Or at least I thought I was. His phone buzzed. Maddie's ringtone. Of course. He glanced at it, then back at me. Go ahead, I said quietly. Answer it. She probably has another crisis that needs your attention. Anna, please. No. I turned back to my laptop. I'm done playing this game. Either you see what's happening or you don't. But I won't keep pretending everything's fine while she dismantles our life piece by piece. He took a step toward me, then stopped as his phone buzzed again. I watched him hesitate, watched the moment he chose, just like he always did. I have to take this, he muttered, already walking away. I waited until his voice faded down the hallway, then opened my email. The message to Walter was already drafted. I need to show you something. Meet me tomorrow at 10 a.m. My cursor hovered over the send button. Once I did this, there would be no going back. No more peaceful family dinners. No more pretending we were one big happy family. I thought of my empty shelves, of Eric's retreating back, of Maddie's smug smile at yesterday's dinner. I clicked send. Walter's coffee had gone cold, untouched, as he studied the evidence spread across Sam's dining room table. Bank statements, screenshots, a detailed timeline of missing pieces and mysterious payments. His engineer's mind cataloging each detail, connecting dots I'd been too close to see. $10,000, he said finally. That's how much Eric has given her in the past year alone. Sam leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. There's more. Show him the storage unit, Anna. My hands shook as I pulled up the photos on my laptop. I followed her yesterday, Unit 47, at Safe Store on Mason Street. I turned the screen toward Walter. Paid for with Eric's credit card. The images showed what I'd discovered through the unit's partially open door. Shelves of collectibles, jewelry, designer bags. Some I recognized as mine. Others belonged to Helen, items she'd reported missing over the years. But most I'd never seen before. Walter's face aged 10 years in 10 seconds. She's been doing this to other people. I tracked some of the eBay sales, Sam said. She's been targeting wealthy families she befriends through her temp jobs, gets invited to their homes, gains their trust. Then things start disappearing, I finished. Small things at first, easy to dismiss as misplaced. Walter pushed back from the table. Have you gone to the police? And tell them what? That my sister-in-law is stealing family heirlooms and selling them online? That my husband is financing her lifestyle? I laughed, the sound hollow. Maddie's too smart for that. Everything's tangled up in family politics and plausible deniability. My phone buzzed. Eric again. Third call today. I declined it. He needs to know, Walter said quietly. He won't believe me. He never does. I gathered the papers, organizing them with mechanical precision. But maybe he'll believe you. Walter's phone chimed. He checked it, his expression darkening. Helen says Maddie's at the house. She's telling them you broke into her apartment. Says she has security footage. Sam swore. I felt oddly calm. Of course she does. I pulled up one final email on my laptop. Because I did exactly what she expected me to do. What she wanted me to do. The email was from Maddie's landlord, responding to my inquiry about her security system. There wasn't one. Never had been. She's playing us against each other, I realized. All of us. Helen's reference check, my investigation, your confrontations. She's orchestrating everything. Walter stood abruptly. I need to make some calls. Dad, wait. But he was already heading for the door, phone in hand. Sam watched him go. He'll warn her. No, I smiled, remembering the steel I'd seen in Walter's eyes. He'll do exactly what she expects. Try to handle it quietly, protect the family name. And while he's doing that, we'll be following the money. Sam pulled out her laptop. I've got a friend in digital forensics who owes me a favor. My phone buzzed again. This time, a text from Helen. Family emergency meeting tonight. Everyone must attend. Below it, a message from Maddie. Time to end this, sister dear, unless you'd rather Eric finds out about those mysterious transfers from your personal account to offshore banks? I stared at the screen, ice spreading through my veins. I hadn't made any transfers. Sam. My voice sounded distant. I need you to check something for me. She was already typing. The banking Trojans? Yeah, I see them. She's good. Backdated transactions, fake paper trails. If I hadn't known what to look for, she's framing me. The realization hit like a physical blow. She's been setting this up for months. Anna. Sam grabbed my arm. This isn't about your collectibles anymore. This is about destroying you. I looked at the evidence spread across the table, all the careful documentation of Maddie's crimes that now seemed hopelessly naive. She'd been 10 steps ahead the whole time. No, I said, reaching for my car keys. This is about making sure she never destroys anyone else. I sat in my parked car outside the Turner house, watching shadows move behind the curtains. Sam's words echoed in my head. You're walking into a trap, but sometimes the only way past a trap is through it. My phone lit up with a text from Sam. Digital forensics confirmed it. The banking Trojan originated from Maddie's IP address. But Anna, there's something else. Call me. I silenced the phone and stepped out into the evening air. Through the front window, I could see them all gathered in the living room. Helen wringing her hands, Walter standing rigid by the fireplace, Eric pacing, and Maddie, perfectly positioned in the center of it all. The door opened before I could knock. Helen's face was drawn, older than I'd ever seen it. Oh, Anna. She reached for my hand, then stopped herself. We've been discussing things. The living room fell silent as I entered. Eric wouldn't meet my eyes. Maddie dabbed at hers with a tissue. Before we start, Walter said, his engineer's precision cutting through the tension, I think we should review the facts. Facts? Maddie's voice quavered. Like the fact that my sister-in-law has been systematically trying to destroy my life? Or the fact that she's been embezzling money through offshore accounts? I stayed silent, watching Eric's reaction. His shoulders tensed, but he didn't turn around. I have proof, Maddie continued, pulling out a folder. Bank statements, transfer records, fabricated with a banking Trojan from your IP address. The words fell like stones into the silence. Maddie didn't miss a beat. More accusations? More paranoid theories? She turned to Eric. Tell them about the storage unit, honey. Tell them what you found. Eric finally turned. There were photos, Anna. Surveillance photos of Maddie. Her apartment. Her workplace. You've been stalking her. I was gathering evidence of her thefts. I pulled out my phone, pulled up the photos of the storage unit. Everything she's stolen is in there. Your mother's jewelry, my collectibles. The storage unit you broke into? Maddie interjected. The one you photographed illegally? The one paid for with Eric's credit card. Because Eric helped me rent it. Maddie's voice rose. To protect my things from you. I looked at Walter, saw the conflict in his eyes. He knew the truth, had seen the evidence at Sam's house, but family loyalty ran deep. There's something else, I said quietly, pulling out a final envelope. Something I found in the storage unit. I handed it to Helen. Open it. Helen's hands trembled as she pulled out the photographs. Her breath caught. That's my mother's emerald necklace. She looked up at Maddie. The one you said was stolen during the break-in last year. The break-in that never happened, I added. Check the date stamp on the photo. Maddie launched herself off the couch. This is ridiculous. She's obviously doctored those photos. Eric, are you going to let her do this to me? But Eric was looking at the photos now, recognition dawning. That's the necklace you were wearing in your LinkedIn profile picture last month. For a fraction of a second, Maddie's mask slipped. I saw something cold and calculating in her eyes before the tears started again. My phone buzzed insistently. Sam again. I should have answered earlier, should have heard what else she'd found. But it was too late now. I think, Maddie said, her voice suddenly steady. It's time we discussed the real reason behind Anna's vendetta against me. She pulled out her own phone. Did you know your wife has been meeting with divorce lawyers, Eric? Planning to take everything you have? The room spun. I hadn't met with any lawyers, but I knew, with crushing certainty, that Maddie had evidence suggesting otherwise. She'd thought of everything. That's not, I started, but Eric cut me off. Just stop, Anna. His voice was tired, defeated. Just stop. I looked around the room, at Helen's confusion, Walter's resignation, Eric's betrayal, and realized Maddie had won. She'd orchestrated this perfectly, turning my evidence against me, my investigation into obsession, my defense into attack. But she'd made one mistake. She'd pushed me past caring about winning. My phone wouldn't stop buzzing as I walked out of the Turner house. Sam's messages grew increasingly urgent. Don't confront her yet. Found something bigger. Call me. But I was done waiting, done playing defense. Anna! Eric's voice followed me into the darkness. Where are you going? I turned, watching him jog down the front steps. Behind him, Maddie stood in the doorway, her silhouette framed by warm light, the perfect picture of concerned sisterly devotion. To the police, I said flatly. I'm done protecting your family's reputation. With what evidence? Maddie called out, her voice carrying just the right note of pity. The photos you took illegally? The banking records you fabricated? The storage unit, I started, but Eric cut me off. The one I helped her rent? To protect her things from you? He ran his hands through his hair. God, Anna, listen to yourself. You're obsessed. My phone buzzed again. Sam, take the call, Maddie suggested sweetly. It's probably your divorce lawyer. Or should I tell them about that too? I reached for my car door, but Eric grabbed my arm. We need to talk about this, about what you've been planning. Planning? I yanked free. Like your sister planned the break-in that never happened? Like she planned those offshore transfers from my account? Stop! His voice cracked. Just stop lying. Lying! I laughed, the sound sharp enough to cut. You want to talk about lies? Ask your sister about her last job. Ask her what really happened to that client's confidential files. Maddie's face changed for a split second, a flash of something cold and calculating before the tears started. Eric, she sobbed. Make her stop, please. He moved toward her automatically, protective big brother mode engaged. I watched them, really watched them, and something clicked into place. You knew, I said quietly. About the files. About everything. Eric froze. You helped her cover it up, didn't you? That's why you gave her the money. Why you keep giving her money. Anna, that's why you won't believe me. Because if I'm right about her, then you're complicit. Maddie's sobs stopped abruptly. She stepped forward, mask dropping completely. Careful, Anna, she said softly. You're not the only one who can gather evidence. Those offshore accounts, they're real. And guess whose name is all over the paperwork? My phone buzzed one final time, then fell silent. Too late, I realized what Sam had been trying to tell me. The police are already investigating, Maddie continued. Anonymous tip. They'll find exactly what they're looking for. A pattern of theft and fraud, all leading back to you. You set me up. The words felt hollow. From the beginning. No, Anna. Her smile was almost gentle. You did this to yourself. Your obsession with proving me wrong. Your need to control everything. You made it so easy. I looked at Eric, searching for any sign of the man I'd married. He wouldn't meet my eyes. The difference between us, Maddie said, is that I understand family, loyalty. You've been trying to tear us apart since day one. My phone lit up with a text from an unknown number. Detective Morris here. Need to speak with you regarding suspicious financial activity. Please contact immediately. Go ahead, Maddie whispered. Tell them your theories about me, about Eric's involvement. See who they believe. The unstable woman obsessed with her collectibles, or the family trying to protect themselves from her increasingly erratic behavior. I got in my car, hands shaking so badly I could barely grip the key. Through the windshield, I watched Eric comfort his sister, watched Helen and Walter appear in the doorway, a perfect family tableau. My phone buzzed again. Sam, one last time. Don't do anything. Coming to you. Have proof of everything. But as I started the engine, I realized it didn't matter anymore. Proof, truth, justice. Maddie had twisted them all into weapons against me. She hadn't just won. She'd made sure I'd lose everything in the process. The only question left was, what did I have left to lose? Detective Morris's office felt too small, too warm. Sam sat beside me, laptop open, while Maddie perched across the desk. Perfect posture, perfect tears. As you can see, Maddie was saying, the transfer records clearly show a sophisticated banking Trojan, Sam interrupted, turning her laptop toward the detective. Originating from this IP address. She slid a paper across the desk. Registered to Madison Turner. Maddie's smile didn't waver. More desperate accusations? Detective, I've provided documentation of Anna's offshore accounts, her surveillance photos, and I've provided evidence that those documents were fabricated, Sam countered, along with proof of Ms. Turner's previous corporate espionage. Morris studied both women, then turned to me. Mrs. Carter, you've been quiet. Because this isn't about words anymore. I pulled out my phone, opened the video I'd received an hour ago. This arrived anonymously this morning. The footage was grainy, but clear enough. Maddie in her apartment, carefully packaging my missing collectibles, logging. Then Eric appearing, arguing, pointing at the boxes. Maddie's smile cracked. That's clearly doctored. The metadata proves it's authentic, Sam said. And there's more. The video continued. Maddie showing Eric documents, him becoming agitated, her consoling him. The audio was muffled but distinct. If anyone finds out about the client files, you'll lose everything. We have to protect each other. Turn it off, Maddie whispered. The timestamp, Morris noted, matches the day before Mrs. Carter's accounts were compromised. You don't understand, Maddie's voice shook. She's obsessed with destroying our family. These are all lies. Like the lies about Helen's jewelry? I asked quietly. The ones you sold to fund your gambling habit? Maddie went very still. How did you? Walter finally checked the casino records. All those times you borrowed money for rent. He tracked every payment. Dad would never. He's outside right now, Sam said, with the receipts from your pawned items. And Eric's waiting too. Maddie's mask shattered. She lunged across the desk, reaching for my phone. But Morris was faster. Ms. Turner, sit down. You can't prove anything. Her voice rose hysterically. Eric will back me up. He has to. If I go down... He goes down too? I finished. That's why he helped you, isn't it? Because you had proof he knew about the stolen client files. He's my brother, she spat. He chose me. He'll always choose me. The door opened. Eric stood there, looking older than I'd ever seen him. No, Maddie, he said quietly. Not anymore. She stared at him, betrayal written across her face. You can't. I protected you. You blackmailed me, he corrected. Used me to hurt my wife, to hurt everyone who tried to help you. I was helping you. She was crying now, real tears finally. Everything I did was to protect us. Ms. Turner, Morris interrupted. I think it's time we discussed the corporate espionage charges, and the fraud, and the theft. I stood up, suddenly exhausted. I'll be outside. Anna, wait! Eric reached for me, but I stepped back. Don't! My voice was steady. You chose her. Every time, for years, you chose her. And now you're only here because she finally went too far. I'm sorry. I know. I looked at Maddie, still protesting her innocence to Morris. But sorry doesn't fix what's broken. Sam followed me out, past Walter's slumped shoulders and Helen's quiet sobs. In the parking lot, she touched my arm. You did it. You won. But watching through the window as my marriage crumbled alongside Maddie's lies, I wasn't sure victory was the right word. I'd exposed the truth, yes. Achieved justice, maybe. But the cost. My phone buzzed one last time. A text from Eric. I never deserved you. I deleted it without responding and turned toward home, leaving the wreckage of the Turner family behind me. Sometimes winning feels exactly like losing, but at least I could walk away knowing who I was and who I refused to become. The storage unit door rattled upward, revealing shelves of carefully cataloged items, each piece tagged, photographed, and ready for return to its rightful owner. Helen's emerald necklace, Walter's vintage watch collection, items from dozens of families Maddie had befriended and betrayed. Sam stood beside me, clipboard in hand. Detective Morris says they've identified most of the owners. Should take about a week to process everything. I lifted a familiar figurine from its shelf, my first Sakura piece, the one that started my collection. Its partner was still missing, probably sold months ago to some unsuspecting collector. You don't have to do this part, Sam said quietly. The police can handle it. Yes, I do. I placed the figurine in its box. Some things you need to finish yourself. My phone buzzed. Another text from Eric. I deleted it without reading, just like the others. The divorce papers were already signed, his confession to the corporate espionage already filed. Some bridges stay burned. The website launches next week, Sam said, changing the subject. Already have 3 authentication requests from serious collectors. I smiled, remembering how the idea had come to me during one of those sleepless nights after Maddie's arrest. A service to verify collectibles' authenticity and ownership history, preventing exactly the kind of fraud she'd perpetrated. Turning poison into medicine. Helen's outside, Sam warned. Want me to tell her you're busy? I shook my head. It's time. Helen looked older, grayer, but her spine was straight as she approached. Anna, Don't apologize again, I interrupted. Please. She nodded, twisting her wedding ring, a nervous habit I'd never noticed before. Walter and I are selling the house, moving closer to our grandchildren in Arizona. Fresh start? Something like that. She reached into her purse, pulled out a small box. I found this in Maddie's things. The police said I could return it personally. Inside lay the missing Sakura figurine, the partner to the one I'd just packed. My hands shook as I lifted it. She kept this one, Helen said softly. Didn't sell it. I think maybe she wanted to understand. Understand what? Why someone would care so much about something that wasn't power or control? Helen's eyes were wet. She never could. I studied the figurine. Two dancers frozen mid-spin, eternally reaching for each other without quite touching. Sometimes the things we collect are the stories we wish we could tell. Anna? Helen's voice cracked. Thank you for stopping her, for making us see. I carefully placed both dancers in their box, together again, but different now, changed by their separation, their journey. I didn't do it for you, I said honestly, or for Eric, or even for justice, really. Then why? I thought about Maddie's perfect mask, about Eric's willing blindness, about the weight of pretending everything was fine when nothing was. Because sometimes the only way to save yourself is to stop playing someone else's game. Sam appeared at my elbow. Last box is packed. Ready? I nodded, picking up the Sakura dancers. Helen stepped forward, hesitated, then turned away. Another bridge not quite burned, but transformed into something different. Something honest. Outside, the summer air hummed with possibility. Sam's car was loaded with website designs and business plans. My apartment waited across town, empty of Eric's things, but full of space for new collections, new stories. You know what's funny? I said as we drove away. Maddie thought she was teaching me about revenge, but what she really taught me was about value. How so? Some things are worth collecting. I touched the box in my lap. And some things are worth letting go. Sam smiled. Speaking of collecting, there's an auction next week. Rare porcelain pieces. Sounds perfect. I watched the storage unit disappear in the rearview mirror, taking the last pieces of my old life with it. But this time, I think I'll collect for joy. The dancers shifted in their box as we turned toward home, their eternal spin finally complete. Not quite touching, but no longer reaching either. Sometimes that's enough.
Michelle, I didn't tell you, but from tomorrow, my parents will be living with us too. Living together without even discussing it? This house was bought by Richard, but isn't that a bit strange? Discussion isn't necessary. Living together is a settled matter. If you can't comply, then sleep outside, got it? On the day we moved into the house with a yard, Richard casually made this declaration. Looking down on his wife, he dumped all the troublesome matters onto me, including the care of his parents. Even the house hunting had been entirely left to me. Normally, one would lose their composure in such a situation. But I responded to him as if it were just a matter of business communication. Okay, I'll sleep in the garden tonight, but don't regret whoever you sleep with, okay? Whoever I sleep with? What are you talking about? Are you cheating on me? Well, I don't mind, do whatever you want. Just don't come back into the house halfway through. At that moment, I smirked without my husband seeing. It was a certain thing that he would regret. I knew everything. The next day was a beautiful, cool, and pleasant morning. When Richard came to the garden, he looked puzzled, not just because I was sleeping in a sleeping bag, but also because a large tent was set up next to me. What are you doing? Did you seriously sleep outside? What about it? You told me to sleep outside, Richard. But actually, it wasn't too bad with the camping sleeping bag and tent. Why do you have a sleeping bag and tent? Did you even have time to prepare that? In response to my husband's questioning, I could only return a mischievous smile. He seemed to realize something was off about my behavior. But he couldn't grasp the full extent of it. Truly, he was a fool. I had been preparing for this moment long before. And my preparations were not limited to just the sleeping bag and tent. There was no way my husband, who looked down on me, could ever have anticipated the extent of my planning. Well, whatever. Hurry up and clean this up and prepare the food. It's embarrassing to have my wife sleeping outside in the garden. He had told me to sleep outside himself. Yet, he ridiculed me with a sarcastic laugh. But I didn't change my expression, because my counterattack had already begun and would end today. Richard muttered complaints with a twisted smile as he walked towards the new house. That's when the in-laws arrived at the new home. They too had a puzzled look upon seeing the garden state. Whether they knew the situation or not, it was undeniably an odd scene. Feeling sorry before my kind in-laws, I had to expose Richard's true nature. I couldn't let him deceive them too. As I greeted my in-laws, they approached me with a confused look to understand the situation. "Michelle, were you really sleeping in the garden?" I was surprised to see the sleeping bag and tent. Was it because it was the first day of moving? Did something happen with Richard? It was natural for the in-laws to be curious. As I pondered where to start explaining, Richard interjected. "Michelle wanted to sleep in the garden. She's into camping, you know. It's troublesome, especially right after moving. But I can understand, the backyard is spacious and seems good for a barbecue." With a calm demeanor as if nothing had happened, Richard lied. His natural act was so convincing that the in-laws quietly accepted his words. This is how he continued to deceive them, all to torment me and hide a significant secret. While puzzled, the in-laws still smiled at me and went inside the new house. "Hey Michelle, just a heads up, don't say anything unnecessary to my parents. Just stay quiet and follow my lead as usual. That's your role, understand? Now clean this up and get ready to make the food. Don't forget to take care of my parents." When the in-laws were out of sight, Richard reverted to his usual commanding tone. Normally, I would have complied, but today was different. Seizing the opportunity for retaliation, I quickly responded. "Understood, I'll prepare for 5 people. We have a very important guest today." "Huh? It's just you and me here. What nonsensical thing are you talking about? Don't irritate me first thing in the morning. This is why useless wives." Richard grumbled as he headed towards the new house. At that moment, I slowly pointed to a certain place. Curious, Richard stopped and shifted his gaze. Shortly after, his eyes widened in shock. "Huh, why are you here? What is this all about?" "Hello, Richard. I've been waiting to talk to you." The man who appeared was Jason White, the department manager at the company where Richard worked. Richard was unable to hide his surprise, especially since Jason had emerged from the tent. It must have been an incomprehensible situation for him. For a few seconds, silence enveloped the area. Richard seemed to be choosing his words carefully but honestly asked Jason, "What did you want to talk about?" "Wait, are Michelle and you having an affair? Come to think of it, Michelle, you said yesterday not to regret whoever you slept with." "Huh? What are you talking about? There's no way that's the case. Mr. White arrived about 30 minutes ago. I also like camping." "Richard, I waited inside the tent until you woke up. Arrived 30 minutes ago? So, did you overhear our conversation just now?" As if drained of blood, Richard's face paled. The conversation had been completely overheard by Jason. I had heard from Michelle, but I didn't want to believe it until the end. That you were hiding your true nature and bullying your wife. Jason spoke slowly and calmly, but his words were tinged with anger towards Richard. Panic surged through Richard, and his body began to tremble slightly. "No, this is a misunderstanding, Mr. White. I just spoke a bit harshly, but it was never bullying." "Spoke a bit harshly? It didn't seem that way to me. Your words were clearly malicious and condescending. What has Michelle ever done to you?" Jason's anger intensified, and Richard's trembling grew. The attitude he had displayed while ridiculing me was nowhere to be found. He was like a frog being stared down by a snake, completely frozen. "I can't believe it, Richard. You do excellent work at the company. But to behave like this towards your wife. I'm frankly disappointed. I really didn't intend to bully my wife. I've been frustrated because work hasn't been going well recently. And I guess I took it out on her." Sweating profusely, Richard frantically scrambled for words to defend himself. As Jason had mentioned, Richard was highly regarded at work. Not only for his job performance, but also for his personality. If one did not know any better, it would be hard to believe he could bully his wife. However, Jason and I knew everything. They were aware that Richard had been deceiving those around him and hiding a significant fact. And today, Jason had come here in connection with that hidden fact. Quietly, Jason told Richard the name of a woman. "Anna Parker, you know her well, don't you, Richard? She's an employee at a client I'm in charge of." "Did something happen to her?" "She's my wife." At those words, Richard's eyes filled with surprise and confusion. And he struggled to find words. His face paled suddenly, and his eyes showed fear. Jason White looked at him with a cold gaze. Richard took a deep breath to calm himself and hesitantly began to speak. "Anna Parker is your wife, Mr. White?" "No way. But her surname is different, right?" "She's Anna Parker, isn't she? Anna uses her maiden name at work. It seems smoother for business as everyone is accustomed to her maiden name. There are several other women at her workplace who also use their maiden names." I didn't know anything. Anna never told me anything either." Richard was more desperate than ever, and there was a reason for his desperation. He had been having an affair with Anna, unaware that she was his boss's wife. Jason's visit to the house today was to discuss this affair. "When Michelle told me about your affair, I was truly shocked. That the other woman was my wife, no less. This isn't something that can just be overlooked. Well, before that, infidelity is inexcusable no matter who it involves. You were betraying Michelle. Michelle told you? When? How long have you known?" "I've known for several months. It started when you began to act coldly towards me after finding out I was infertile." The trigger for Richard's bullying was the discovery of my infertility. I was undergoing infertility treatments. But Richard was not supportive and became increasingly colder, leaving me feeling isolated. One day, while he said he was going on a business trip, and I went out camping as a hobby, I accidentally witnessed him leaving for a romantic trip. That's when I decided to investigate his infidelity. As a result, I discovered that his affair was with his boss's wife. This fact ignited a desire for revenge within me. Amidst this, Richard brought up the idea of buying a house with a garden. His suggestion served as a catalyst for advancing my revenge plan. I monitored his actions and prepared a plan for revenge, leading up to today. Richard wanted children, right? That's why I was trying hard with the infertility treatments. But instead of supporting me, you stopped even listening to me. You discarded me and had an affair with Anna, didn't you? Richard, You just said you didn't intend to bully your wife. But it was premeditated, wasn't it? You were trying to drive her to divorce. Not telling her about living with your parents was also part of your harassment, wasn't it? That's not. With words filled with undeniable anger, Richard was left stammering. This hit the nail on the head. And both Jason and I glared at him with eyes full of disappointment and disdain. Richard's face turned pale as a sick person's, and his body trembled violently. Yet, he forced himself to speak, unable to admit the truth. I admit I've been harsh on Michelle. But the accusations of infidelity by Michelle and Mr. White are just baseless, aren't they? There's no proof. Michelle said I was on a romantic trip. But I just happened to run into Anna on a business trip. We had late meetings and went out for drinks because of work, but I wasn't unfaithful. I see, indeed there's no proof. We didn't prepare any. Right, Michelle? Yes, that's right. There's no proof. Or rather, it's not needed. But Richard, you definitely were unfaithful. Just admit it honestly and apologize to Mr. White first. Michelle, cut it out. I didn't cheat. If you want to make me admit it, show me proof. Just because you've got Mr. White on your side doesn't mean you can boss me around. Richard yelled at me, losing all composure. His ferocity shook the air around us. It was proof that he was cornered, with no more room to hide his true nature. Unaware that every excuse he made only tightened the noose around his neck. He was truly foolish. What's the matter, Richard? Why are you raising your voice so much? It was heard all the way inside the house. Ah, that man there, he's Mr. White, isn't he? I'm terribly sorry for causing such a commotion. Actually, I came here today to discuss the matter of Richard's infidelity. Jason spoke straightforwardly, causing the in-laws to be dumbfounded. Their mouths agape in shock. To them, Richard did not seem like a man who would cheat. So they couldn't immediately believe it. However, being seriously told by Richard's boss made it hard for them to simply deny it. Silence enveloped the surroundings. Then, after about 10 seconds, the father-in-law hesitantly asked Richard. Infidelity. Is it true, Richard? I can't believe Mr. White would come all the way to our house just to joke about it. But I can't comprehend it either. Explain it so that we can understand. Father, it's not true. This is a misunderstanding by Mr. White. He's accusing me of cheating without any proof. I absolutely did not cheat, so please rest assured. Richard was acting as usual. Maybe it was ingrained in him after years of practice. Even in such a situation, he smoothly lied. As the father-in-law fell silent in thought, the mother-in-law then asked me, Michelle, what on earth is going on? I don't understand anything. There was a sleeping bag and tent in the garden which I thought was strange. But is that related to Richard's cheating? Is Richard really cheating? Mother, I'm sorry to have shocked you. But what Mr. White is saying is true. Richard is having an affair. Moreover, his partner is Mrs. White. I will prove it now. After saying this, I pointed again to a certain place. Richard and the in-laws checked where I was pointing, which was the tent set up in the garden. They looked puzzled, but the next moment, they were about to witness a shocking scene. Everyone, I am truly sorry for the trouble I have caused. Emerging from the tent was Anna Parker, the wife of director Jason White and my husband's affair partner. In fact, Jason hadn't come alone, he was accompanied by Anna. This meant that Anna had been privy to the entire discussion all along. The in-laws, meeting Anna for the first time, were shocked to see an unfamiliar woman emerge from the tent. Meanwhile, my husband was utterly shaken to find his affair partner had been so close all this time. Richard, everything Michelle has said is correct. We don't even need proof because Anna herself has fully admitted to the affair. As a matter of fact, I do have evidence, but I chose not to present it. Having Anna confirm it was quicker, and I also wanted to see your reaction. Just as expected, you showed your true colors, without even realizing you were sealing your own fate. Can you still make excuses, I wonder? My own Anna here with me. Michelle, how thoroughly prepared are you? By the way, Anna, have you told them everything? To my husband's question, Anna simply nodded quietly. Once again, my husband's body began to tremble, and the color drained from his face. Father, mother, as I was saying earlier, I have been subjected to bullying by Richard. I was also not informed about this living arrangement. The sleeping bag and tent set up in the garden were at Richard's command. He deemed me useless because of my infertility and chose to have an affair with Anna. I don't understand. Richard, you told us that Michelle proposed living together. And that's why we bought the new house. Michelle wanted to repay us. She said that changing the environment might help with the fertility treatments. Are you saying that was all a lie? Michelle was supposed to be supported by you, right? Far from supporting her, you were planning to discard her. And you deceived us too, Richard. I can't believe it. Disappointment and anger from the in-laws finally made my husband apologize. I'm truly sorry. I was shocked to find out about Michelle's infertility. Having children and living with them was also my dream. If I couldn't have children with Michelle, I thought I might have to remarry someone else. That's when I met Anna, and I thought she could fulfill my dream. I didn't mean any harm. Richard revealed his innermost thoughts while trembling, finally understanding that excuses wouldn't work anymore. He continued to apologize. However, immediately after, his body flew through the air and hit the ground with a dull thud. An extremely furious father-in-law stood there, looking like he might burst a blood vessel at any moment. Michelle wanted children just as much as you did. Did you ever think about how she feels? Not being able to have them even though she wants to? Is Michelle your property? Do you throw her away when you don't need her anymore? What do you say, Richard? Answer me. For the first time, I saw my usually gentle father-in-law show such anger. But more than that, his expression was filled with sadness. It was unthinkable that his beloved son was doing such inhumane things behind his back, and still trying to justify them. I am not a parent yet, but if I imagine if it were my child, it would tear me apart. Michelle's mother also approached Richard lying on the ground, her face just as sad. I couldn't bear to let them continue being deceived, even though it hurt the in-laws. Richard, lying on the ground, turned his gaze to me. While looking into his eyes, I delivered the prepared words. Richard, I will divorce you and also demand compensation for the mental anguish you caused me. At the same time, I presented the already filled out divorce papers. Lying face down, Richard received them. All he could do now was accept everything and take responsibility. Yet, Richard made an unbelievable move even now. Father is right. Michelle is my property. I'm discarding her because she's no longer needed. And just to make it clear, it's not my fault. It's all Michelle's fault. If I had known about the infertility, I would never have married her. Finding out after getting married is almost like fraud. What compensation? You, being infertile, should be the one paying. Richard crumpled the divorce papers and threw them at my face. The papers hit my cheek and rolled on the ground. You, how dare you? Don't mess with me. Once again, the father-in-law grabbed Richard by the collar. He looked ready to beat him up, but I stopped him. Michelle, why stop? This can't be allowed. We shouldn't let him do whatever he wants. Yes, Father. I feel the same way. I have no intention of forgiving him. But your health is more important. I can't let you get hurt. Besides, Richard isn't even worth hitting now. Please leave the rest to me. My calm demeanor made the father-in-law quietly let go of Richard. I took a deep breath, then pulled out a piece of paper and told Richard. Infertility is all my fault? I should pay the compensation? Can you still say the same after seeing this? Richard was speechless as he received the paper. It contained results he had never anticipated. What? This is a lie. What is this? I'm infertile? I can't have children? Yes, the cause of the infertility was not me but Richard. I had asked him to just provide a sample for the infertility treatments. Infertility isn't always due to the woman, about half the time, it's due to men. The test results diagnosed Richard with azoospermia. There might be a possibility of recovery with treatment, but it seemed difficult. Of course, I tried to report this to him. But he was already absorbed in his affair and wouldn't even talk properly. Well, even if he wasn't having an affair, I don't know if he would have listened to me. He had that little interest and love for me. Ironically, this moment became one of the few times Richard faced me directly. I don't believe it. This must be some trick by Michelle, right? Trying to frame me is useless. I don't care if you don't believe it. You will understand eventually. All I want is to cut ties with Richard and have him receive the appropriate retribution. Please sign the divorce papers quickly. You really mean that? It's a lie. Tell me it's a lie. While holding his head, Richard kept looking over the test results again and again. Mr. White and the in-laws could only sigh deeply. Anna seemed to deeply regret it as well. Leaving Richard behind, we moved away from the new house, and Mr. and Mrs. White went home to discuss. The in-laws then deeply apologized to me. Even though we didn't know, we couldn't see Michelle suffering. We don't expect to be forgiven, but this is how it is. We'll do whatever we can for you. Even if you divorce Richard, we will always be on your side. We'll make sure he takes responsibility, so just wait. There's no need for you two to apologize. I was also at fault for not consulting sooner and just going along with it. I also nearly caused you both a lot of trouble. Actually, I revealed a fact I had kept from my in-laws. They were surprised but chuckled ruefully, muttering. Richard brought this on himself, at my thorough preparation. Time passed, and after the divorce was finalized, I returned to my parents' home. It wasn't long before Richard, now my ex-husband, started bombarding me with calls. Of course, I knew why he was calling. So I deliberately ignored his calls a few times before finally answering. What do you want, Richard? We're divorced now, so why are you calling? You finally answered. You knew I was calling and ignored me, right? Never mind that. I'm in real trouble right now. I thought it was your doing, so I called. His voice held not a hint of composure. Even over the phone, I could vividly imagine his frantic state. I almost laughed, thinking, he's finally noticed. I decided to play dumb while revealing the truth. What kind of trouble? I don't know anything about that. Oh, but there is one thing I do know. The new house you bought turned out to be a defective property. I knew you knew it. Don't mess with me. I was too busy to notice earlier, but it's not even livable. What are you going to do about it? What do I do? I'm not doing anything. And it's not like you didn't notice because you were busy. You dumped the house hunting on me, remember? You were too late to notice because it was all on me, right? I just followed your instructions to find a house. You were the one who decided to buy it in the end. Isn't it strange to complain to me about that, Richard? When it came to buying the house with a yard, Richard made the decision on his own but left all the house hunting to me. At that point, I was already plotting revenge, which led me to ensure Richard would end up in a defective house. Identifying a defective property is easy with some internet research, checking for uneven floors, ceilings, and how the doors and windows function. I made a checklist and went to several viewings, choosing the property with the most issues marked. By Richard's reaction, it seemed my plan had worked. However, the one miscalculation was that Richard tried to move in with the in-laws without telling me. It was a close call that could have troubled the in-laws too. But now they live peacefully elsewhere without him. Michelle. I'm sorry for everything, so please help me out. I can't even think about moving because of the compensation payments. I had to quit my job, and there's the fertility treatment too. I really regret it. I should never have cheated. I should have cherished you more. So you finally realized it because you found out you're infertile? That's really funny. It's too late, everything is too late. All Richard can do now is regret and reflect, and start over. It doesn't involve me anymore. Wait, don't hang up. Weren't we married? Don't just abandon me like that. Anna has left me too. I've been disowned by my parents, and I don't have any relatives I can rely on. You're all I have left. Perhaps Richard truly was repentant at that moment. He certainly sounded desperate. But his desire to reconcile was for his own sake. In the end, he never thought about anyone but himself. After deceiving everyone around him, now he expects help in his time of need? I've never heard such a convenient story. I could have just hung up, but I felt compelled to say, Richard, I remember clearly what you said. A wife is an object I own. I'll discard her when I no longer need her. I really couldn't understand what you meant. Before being a wife, I'm a person. But now I think this, I don't need you in my life. It would be better if everyone abandoned you. My wish is for Richard to regret this for the rest of his life. Don't ever contact me again. Though I could still hear Richard's voice from the other end. I didn't care and hung up, blocking his number. He would surely learn that some actions in life are irreversible. As for me, I started living alone, working part-time, and enjoying my hobby of camping. Mr. White, having divorced as well, seemed to have more free time and joined me on camping trips. We've developed a relationship akin to comrades in arms, which I find quite comforting. Meanwhile, my in-laws continue to live peacefully, still showing concern for me. If you ever need anything, just tell us, they say with a smile. The in-laws who stood by me that day are genuinely warm and kind people. Seeing them, I'm reminded once again, marriage isn't about hierarchy. It's about standing side by side and supporting each other. Your husband is dead, and you'll be going back to your parents' home, right? We'll live in this house then. Just after the funeral of my dear husband, who suddenly left this world, his parents, my in-laws, visited me as I was engulfed in sorrow. Though not many, this house is filled with memories of living with my husband. Why must I be the one to leave? But before I could even wipe my tears, my mother-in-law coldly stated this. My name is Jenny. I work as an office clerk at a real estate agency. The meeting with my dear husband, Ted, was facilitated by the real estate agency where I work. He was the brother of my male colleague, and the two brothers were very close, often visiting each other since their workplaces were near. As I worked with him, I became friends with my colleague, who later became my brother-in-law. This connection led him to introduce me to his older brother. Gradually, as I was invited by the brothers to have lunch together, our time spent together increased. I recognized Ted as a bright and good man, but I had not considered him romantically. Nor did I think he saw me that way until one day, something changed. We were supposed to meet at a restaurant booked by my colleague. But suddenly, he couldn't make it due to urgent business. It seemed a waste to cancel the reservation. So, for the first time, it was just the two of us. I later learned that the brothers had conspired, with the younger brother arranging for us to be alone. The conversation flowed easily, enhanced by the delicious food. And we quickly found ourselves growing closer, sharing our backgrounds and values. The more I discovered about his inner warmth, the more I was drawn to his warm smile. This day marked a turning point in our relationship. And it didn't take long for us to get married. It wouldn't have happened without my brother-in-law's help, for which I am profoundly grateful. Then came the day to meet the in-laws. I was filled with anxiety, but they welcomed me very kindly. The considerate exchanges continued, and I found myself relaxing. I'm really glad you could come. We've been looking forward to meeting you, Jenny. We hope today will be a good day, and we've prepared a lot of food. My mother-in-law said this, taking great care of me. My in-laws, like their eldest son, my husband, were very independent people and easy to get along with. I felt relieved and grateful for the enjoyable time I spent at my in-laws' home. We had many interactions, but my in-laws always supported our happiness, without imposing any ideas about marriage or children, maintaining a comfortable distance. Eventually, the idea of living together at my in-laws came up. But we had plans to build our own home. Actually, my grandfather left a house for me. As I explained, my in-laws listened intently and nodded. I was my grandfather's only grandchild, and he adored me, eventually leaving me a well-renovated house and land. He passed away after the inheritance procedures were completed. The land was nearby, and its value had skyrocketed due to redevelopment. However, I knew from my long experience in real estate that selling it, rather than living there, would be more beneficial for our ideal home plans. I was grateful for my grandfather's love, but since he had told me I could sell the house if I wanted, we had already considered selling it. After our marriage, we moved there. However, it was far from work, and living there, despite the good location, was impractical. As we planned the sale, a significant change came into our lives. My husband, a salesperson, was transferred. His company had branches nationwide, and he was the only suitable candidate. So refusing the transfer was not an option. I'll definitely come back on holidays. Plus, my parents will come to visit. It's no trouble, but could you take them out? That's fine, your parents are lovely people. But, it looks like selling the house will have to wait. So, my husband's solo assignment was decided because of my job. It was sudden, but I endured the loneliness and worry, waiting for the day we could live together again. As my husband said, on his days off, my in-laws, especially my mother-in-law, would often visit. She told me how she had endured loneliness many times while raising young children during my father-in-law's business trips. Even without children, you can nurture family memories. Why don't we go out together? Shopping can clear your mind. Let's go, Jenny. Thanks to my mother-in-law, I didn't feel lonely, and my holidays became busy. However, I gradually began to notice troubling signs. On my days off, my mother-in-law almost always invited me out. That was fine, but after a month, her invitations became more forceful, regardless of my fatigue or housework. I'd like to rest this week. If I said that, my mother-in-law would frown as if I were being selfish. But isn't it fun to go out together? Or do you mean to say you don't like going out with me? No, that's not it, but you've been taking me out every week, don't you need a break too? My mother-in-law looked sad. Even as I tried to clear up the misunderstanding, she refused to listen. Reluctantly agreeing, she would then burst into a smile and act as if she had never clung to me so persistently. My suspicions about my mother-in-law's behavior grew. The places she forced me to go were stores that led to high expenses. The shopping at brand stores and expensive meals continued, and I was manipulated into paying. My mother-in-law would often leave the store first, leaving me to handle the payments. She never thanked me for the payments, nor did she ever repay them. Indeed, I had a house and a decent salary, so I wasn't worried about savings. However, having always been frugal as a couple, I couldn't help feeling uncomfortable with my mother-in-law's extravagant behavior. It was the same when both in-laws were present. In fact, with my father-in-law joining, my burden only increased. I knew I needed to resolve this, but it was hard to discuss with my husband. He had said, "I will definitely come back on holidays." His branch office was very busy, and he rarely could return. I heard from Mom that you're going out every week. Are you managing okay? Doesn't seem like there's anything to worry about. When I video called my husband, I could see the bags under his eyes and his slightly thinner cheeks. His work fatigue was evident. I felt guilty about bringing up the issue with my mother-in-law, and ended up pretending everything was fine. Your mom has been really kind to me. Take care of yourself, Ted. I'm okay, so don't worry. While I misled my husband, I couldn't refuse to cover the expenses with my in-laws. However, their behavior escalated, and finally, when I said I couldn't go out one day, they said this. So, hey, could you lend me some money? What? I have to pay? Just a little bit, really just a bit. I've already booked the restaurant. I'll take another friend instead, so could you cover what I'm short? I wanted to refuse, but that would only complicate things, leaving no resolution. Resigned, I opened my wallet. But such attitudes were never shown in front of my husband. Why don't you ask Ted? I subtly probed my mother-in-law, to which she replied, it would be shameful to ask Ted. She thought it was embarrassing to ask her eldest son. So it was fine to ask his wife for money. I had given up on my mother-in-law long ago, and her demands for money had become a routine matter. At least, if I gave her some pocket money, she would stop forcibly taking me out. I knew the problem had escalated, but I was too exhausted from the inability to converse with my mother-in-law. My mother-in-law's actions became increasingly inexplicable and bizarre. At times she would arrive unannounced and survey the inside and outside of the house as if licking every corner. making me feel like my home's privacy was being violated. Are these furnishings left by Jenny's grandfather? They're wonderful. It's amazing that you can afford such luxurious items. Some of the furniture that remained was antique, favored by my grandfather. My mother-in-law seemed to like them, often coming over and admiring them as if they were her own. This is mine and my husband's house. I began to consider opening up about my mother-in-law's behavior. My husband might be surprised. But how wonderful it would be if we could think of a way to handle her together. Her actions are not pleasant. Invading privacy, even if we are in-laws, is wrong. However, at the same time, the duration of my husband's solo assignment was determined. If I could just bear it a little longer, he would return. And the in-laws mooching for money would end. A faint hope sprouted in my heart. My husband was working hard every day, so I just had to endure a little longer. I eagerly awaited my reunion with my husband, but the situation took an unexpected turn. What? Ted collapsed and is in the hospital? My mind went blank. The call came from a colleague at his place of assignment, and I hurried to the hospital. Perhaps due to his hectic schedule, he had suddenly suffered a heart attack. Ted was rushed by ambulance, but it was too late, and my gentle husband, whose health was his asset, passed away from a heart attack that no one could have anticipated. I couldn't accept the reality as I faced the funeral. I don't remember much due to the overwhelming sense of loss. My brother-in-law rushed over, handling most of the tasks. I'm sorry. You've lost your brother, yet you're helping me so much. It's my brother's funeral, of course I'd help. Besides, is everything okay with the land? Is the house ready? As we tidied up after the funeral, I talked with my brother-in-law and nodded, replying, all set. A few days after my husband's funeral, my in-laws came to the house together. It was clear they weren't here to console me. It's a pity about our son, but we're here, so don't worry. My mother-in-law's face oddly grinned. More shockingly, she had arranged a truck, and it was packed with furniture and belongings from the in-laws' house. I was too stunned and confused to speak. This looked unmistakably like a move. My in-laws were planning to move in without any discussion. What made them think this was acceptable? But the answer was clear. Are you after our land? Despite my confusion, I voiced the concern that had been in my heart. My mother-in-law smiled coldly. The land value has shot up quite a bit. We've had our eyes on this house for a long time. In fact, you got married to our son because of this inheritance. We allowed the marriage because you inherited it. I was overwhelmed with despair, at a loss for words. Are you saying you and I will live together? What? Don't say something stupid. As I asked confusedly, my mother-in-law's eyebrows rose. Ted's death was unexpected, but it seemed that even if he hadn't died, my mother-in-law intended to take over this house. My in-laws planned to oust me and take over the land themselves. They apparently assumed I would leave the house because my son had died. Your husband is dead, and you'll go back to your parents' house, right? This house will be empty, and it'd be sad, so we'll live here. That's why I'm telling you not to worry. My mother-in-law's grin twisted. I felt fear, but pointed out her mistake. The house has already been sold, though. I held back laughter at my mother-in-law's misunderstanding, unable to fully hide a smirk. In response, my mother-in-law froze. Just then, a different moving truck arrived. Sorry, we're here for the delivery to this house. A robust mover got out of the truck, and since another company's truck was there, he came to check with us. My mother-in-law's movers also descended, unable to start their work due to the arrival of another truck. Realizing something was amiss, they asked the in-laws for an explanation, but both were too flustered to respond clearly. Arguing with everyone there wouldn't solve anything. Seeing my panicking in-laws, I began to regain my composure and briskly directed the movers. This house has already been sold and the contract is finalized. A new family is moving in. So you can't bring their belongings into someone else's home, right? As the movers were shocked, a luxury car arrived, carrying a wealthy-looking couple and their children. The land was no longer mine, they were the new owners. My in-laws were even more confused, unable to grasp what was happening. Please move the truck quickly, the new residents need to start their work. After managing to get my mother-in-law's truck to leave, the movers began their work immediately, following the planned procedure to bring in brand new furniture. My in-laws, unable to accept this, started pressing me at the doorstep. The husband, the buyer, had his family take refuge in the car and came over to confront us, starting another round of confusion. Who are these people? We've bought this house. Please send the truck back quickly. I hadn't expected my in-laws to visit, so I apologized profusely to the buyers to soothe their annoyance. But my in-laws weren't leaving. Instead, they pushed past us into the house. Naturally, the inside of the house had changed completely. None of the furniture my husband and I had used remained. My mother-in-law was shocked by the sight and began to scream. What is this? The house is empty. All the antique furniture and lighting I liked are gone. What's going on? She couldn't understand what was happening and was outraged. When the residents finally shouted, "I'll call the police," my father-in-law, who had been flustered, ran and dragged my mother-in-law away to retreat. Once we moved away from the scene, my heated mother-in-law quieted down somewhat. First, I apologized to the residents, told that problems might still arise. I took down the in-laws' names and addresses to get some relief. Despite feeling a strong sense of fatigue, I still had explanations to give to my in-laws. I returned to them and calmly informed them that the move had been completed just days before my husband passed away. This house was always planned to be sold with the land, so it went according to the original plan. The solo assignment of my husband had put a temporary stop to it. But there was a reason things moved so smoothly afterward. My brother-in-law had backed our decision. I was bewildered by the change in my in-laws, who had even started asking for money. But I didn't want to worry my husband and couldn't discuss it with him. Spending my days shut away. Noticing this, my brother-in-law came to my rescue. He had a bad relationship with his parents and had told me he'd help if I ever needed it. Not wanting to sour my marriage or my relationship with my in-laws, I trusted my brother-in-law, who promised to keep things confidential, and decided to confide everything. Upon hearing it, he was furious with our parents. As my husband's brother and my colleague, he understood their scheming well. For him, his brother Ted was his only family, and as Ted's wife, I was like family to him too. Our parents will eventually try to live in that house with you, or conveniently kick you both out to take it for themselves. According to my brother-in-law, both of my in-laws have a high-class mindset to the point of being out of touch with the real world. They are vain and unscrupulous. Especially my mother-in-law, who can appear as a lovely lady to the outside world. But in reality, she is mean-spirited and only thinks of her own convenience. Because he is blood-related, The episodes my brother-in-law shared about our in-laws were particularly intense. In front of my husband, the eldest son, they pretended everything was fine. So my husband likely never knew this side of his parents. In any case, my brother-in-law suggested that we should sell the land early to prevent it from being taken by my in-laws. I agreed with his opinion and decided to proceed with the sale. Even though the property was a precious inheritance from my beloved grandfather, I did not want its existence to become a hurdle for our marriage. Rather, because it was so important, I did not want to leave behind any troubles. Of course, I didn't decide this arbitrarily. I had discussed it with my husband while he was alive, and he agreed. At that time, he became aware of all my in-laws' actions. I hadn't wanted to tell him, but I couldn't complete the sale on my own. However, he fully understood my feelings and decisively condemned his parents' actions. I'm sorry I didn't notice. If Jenny is okay with it, let's complete the sale before my parents make a move. It's a shame, it's the precious house inherited from your grandfather. No, it's okay. Grandfather would agree to let it go if it meant avoiding trouble. I chose to sell the land not because of issues with my in-laws, but to protect my future with my husband. Regarding the sale, my brother-in-law, an expert in real estate, went out of his way to find the right buyer. My task was to find a new place to move to as soon as possible, and act naturally so my in-laws wouldn't suspect anything. The house was sold almost as new due to minimal wear from our living there, and this helped keep the price down. A buyer was found quickly, and the sale was completed smoothly. That was the family that had just arrived. I had originally planned to wait for Ted's return in our new home. He was pleased with the sale, and that was the only regret. The movers efficiently moved furniture in. Despite being kicked out, my in-laws just watched the moving process proceed. They didn't make a scene but couldn't just stand there forever. The movers they had hired were furious and demanded an explanation. As from their perspective, the booking of the move made no sense. I can't believe this is happening, this is a breach of contract. They pressured my in-laws, who fumbled their explanation. Eventually, the furniture had to be taken back, and it seemed they would be charged a substantial additional fee due to the unforeseen circumstances. Finally understanding what was happening, my mother-in-law, trembling, clung to me. This is the home of the eldest son's wife, so it should be our home, right? This situation is strange, isn't it? She tried to convince me with desperate excuses, but I ignored them and left only with my belongings. The land already belonged to the new family, and it wasn't mine anymore, so I had nothing to answer for. The funeral services for my husband, including the first 7 days of mourning, went smoothly. I encountered my in-laws there, and they seemed to want to say something about the house. But ultimately they left quietly without saying anything. I no longer had any obligation to communicate with them, so our interactions dwindled. I began to live peacefully, facing the sadness of losing my husband in the new, smaller home we were supposed to restart our lives in as a couple. I had a considerable amount of savings from the sale, but now that Ted was gone, the plan to build our own home was no longer feasible. As I returned to work, I immersed myself in the few memories I had with my husband and gradually started to look forward again. Meanwhile, my mother-in-law, particularly filled with unresolved grievances, seemed to be accumulating stress. I had not informed her of my new residence, wanting no further involvement with her. Unable to interact with me, her frustrations appeared to grow. She had always been pretentious in front of her eldest son, and now could not go to her estranged younger son. Not knowing my whereabouts, her stress compounded, and eventually, she lost her balance. One night, my mother-in-law resorted to a drastic act. She poured gasoline around the house that had been sold. Fortunately, a passing neighbor found her actions suspicious and restrained her before anything could happen. When the police were alerted, they found she had also prepared old papers and a lighter, and she was arrested for attempted arson. The homeowner, nearly having his property set on fire, was extremely angry when he realized that the woman who had caused a scene on moving day was responsible and insisted on pressing charges. I apologized repeatedly, expressing sorrow for the terrifying experience he faced. But I could do nothing about my mother-in-law's attempted arson. Ultimately, my mother-in-law's fixation on the house led to her being charged. I managed to get forgiveness by repeatedly apologizing, promising that such an incident would never happen again. Raised in luxury, my mother-in-law had always gotten whatever she wanted. When she couldn't have that house, her frustration turned into a warped jealousy, hating the house and the land, leading her to crime and eventually to prison. My father-in-law, who should have been a support, ended up divorcing her forcefully after her arrest, leaving her with no home to return to after her sentence. But that was the result of the path she chose. My brother-in-law, lonely after losing his brother, said, "I can bear it because I have a sister-in-law." Although the ties with my in-laws were thankfully severed, I hadn't lost all family. For the sake of my husband watching over me from heaven, I decided to spend my days peacefully. Please eat a lot. My mother-in-law said this with a smile, offering a plate in front of me. But I couldn't bring myself to accept it. Despite telling her that I have a severe egg allergy and can't eat eggs at all, she tries every trick in the book to feed them to me. Eating them could endanger my life. I tried to refuse, but she smiled brightly and said, "There are no eggs in this meal." Really? My name is Nicole. I'm a housewife living with my husband Patrick and our third-grade son Alex. We were living peacefully as a family of 3. But there was one thing I had to be careful about in my daily life. It is the fact that I have a severe egg allergy. When I was young, eating eggs caused hives all over my body and made the area around my mouth itch. After tests at the hospital, my allergy was confirmed. I tried eating a little bit under the doctor's instructions, but it didn't work. And although I was told that it might suddenly get better as I got older, it never improved even into adulthood. Therefore, I always have to be careful not to eat eggs. Having an allergy is not a bad thing, but it can be slightly inconvenient in daily life. When going out to eat, I have to look for restaurants that serve dishes without eggs, which makes me feel like I'm troubling my friends who dine with me, making it a bit of a hassle. My husband understands this and has said, "It's tough when the allergy symptoms kick in. I'll help as much as I can to ensure you don't accidentally eat anything harmful." I felt very relieved by his support. He mentioned that he saw a classmate suffer from an allergic reaction when he was young, and he couldn't forget it. Indeed, those who have seen an allergic reaction know how painful it can be. I prepare our meals at home, so I carefully separate my own food from that of my husband and son to avoid mistakes. When we dine out, my husband actively checks with the staff if the dishes contain eggs, which I appreciate very much. He said he doesn't want our son to grow up forcing someone with allergies to eat what they shouldn't. And he has explained my allergy to our son in a way he can understand. Thanks to that, our son quickly understood and said, "Mom can't eat eggs because it makes her suffer, so I'll keep them away." He shows consideration by pushing egg dishes away from me, which makes me feel happy about his growth. Our son loves his grandmother and always looks forward to seeing her. She also dotes on him and often calls, which becomes a break from his studies and homework. I am grateful to her for that. However, since my father-in-law passed away, the always smiling and kind mother-in-law has lost her energy and started saying, "I don't feel like cooking without my husband." After finishing our usual phone conversations, she always asks, "When are you coming back next?" I can't immediately answer. So I end the call by saying, "I'll discuss it with Patrick and get back to you." I really want to let our son see her as much as possible. But my mother-in-law lives deep in the mountains, a 3-hour drive away. So it's difficult to visit unless my husband can take a substantial break. So, we discussed it. "Hey, Patrick. About your mother. She's been asking when we can see her next on recent calls. She might be feeling lonely since your father passed away. I'm worried about her health, so can we make time to see her regularly?" After dinner, when things had calmed down, I brought up the topic. My husband said, "Yeah, I'm also worried about Mom, and I want to visit her more often. But I'm concerned that you have to be cautious about her allergy during meals. I told your mother about the allergy at the beginning of our marriage. So I don't think I need to be too nervous about it. Besides, we can solve it by bringing our own deli dishes. Alex also wants to see her, so why don't we plan a visit during his long school holidays?" At that time, I thought that my mother-in-law would surely understand what an allergy is and what symptoms it causes. When I suggested it, my husband agreed. So we decided to make visiting during the summer and winter holidays a regular event. When I told my mother-in-law over the phone that we would visit during the summer and winter breaks, she was delighted and looked forward to it every day. The next winter break, we visited her. That day, my mother-in-law entertained us with lots of homemade dishes. And both my husband and son's eyes sparkled. Initially, I told her that we would bring deli dishes because she doesn't cook much when she's alone, but she insisted on cooking, respecting her wish. My mother-in-law, with a joyful smile, seemed to enjoy cooking for others, while I was excited to eat someone else's cooking after a long time. I didn't want to cause concern by having an allergic reaction later. So I made sure to check if the dishes contained eggs. They seemed fine, and when I double-checked with my mother-in-law, she reassured me, "I haven't used eggs in any of the dishes, so it's safe." I gratefully enjoyed the meal. The homemade dishes were so delicious that I couldn't stop eating. And my mother-in-law was surprised but pleased, saying, "I'm happy you're eating a lot." While my husband and son and I were enjoying the delicious meal, the situation changed drastically 2 hours later. I started to develop hives and breathing difficulties, and although I had a bad feeling, I didn't have time to think as the symptoms worsened. My husband quickly took out an EpiPen from our luggage, which alleviated the symptoms. I was glad I had it with me, as I always take care to avoid eggs. And it had been a long time since I had such a reaction. Our son was quite surprised and immediately came over, asking, "Mom, are you okay? Aren't you in pain?" My mother-in-law was in the bath when the reaction occurred, so I didn't have to worry her unnecessarily. But I wondered why this happened since she had assured me that she hadn't used eggs in any of the dishes. Thinking I might have accidentally eaten something intended for my husband and son, I approached her calmly after her bath. I had an allergic reaction earlier, which wouldn't have happened unless I had ingested eggs. To avoid any dangerous mistakes, could you please tell me exactly which dishes contain eggs from now on? Her response was unexpectedly harsh as she glared at me, a look I hadn't seen before, and snapped, "You're just using your allergy as an excuse. You're just picky because you're too old to be throwing fits, so I tried to fix your attitude." I was stunned, and my usually gentle husband gave his mother a stern look, saying, "Mom, while you were in the bath, Nicole suffered terribly from hives and breathing difficulties. Allergies can be life-threatening. Could you please be more careful?" However, she was unwilling to listen, even to her own son. Instead, she dismissed the concerns, saying, "Everyone eats eggs. It's ridiculous to die from them. That just doesn't happen." My husband got angry to defend me, and she heatedly accused me of manipulating Patrick against her, saying, "You're turning my own son against me. What a terrible daughter-in-law you are." Seeing that further argument was futile, the matter was dropped. But my mother-in-law seemed to think her son had sided with her because he didn't argue back. Observing my silent husband, she smugly remarked, "No matter how much you defend your wife, in the end, you'll listen to your mother." I could tell that my husband was just dumbfounded and had nothing more to say. He suggested that we might stop visiting his mother, but she had always been kind to our son. Although our son knew about my allergy incident, he was unaware that his grandmother was the cause and still loved her dearly. I felt it would be unfair to completely cut off their interaction, so I proposed that I simply not visit anymore, though my mother-in-law kept insisting that I should come too. Deviously, she would tell our son to say, "Mommy, Grandma said you should come too." Unable to ignore my son's words, I reluctantly showed my face once in a while. During those infrequent visits, she continued to prepare dishes with eggs, but I managed to fill up on pickles and oatmeal. She noticed and complained, "Don't just eat pickles, try the dishes I've made too." I was desperately holding back the urge to shout at her, blaming her for my limited food options. Despite these thoughts, traumatized by my initial allergic reaction, I resolved never to eat her cooking again. I overate yesterday and my stomach hasn't settled. Maybe it's my age, but you can eat a lot, so you must be very youthful. I deflected, focusing on conversation to avoid being pressed to eat. I kept the conversation light, discussing our son's school and my husband's work, topics of interest to her. I continued to claim a lack of appetite at subsequent meals to avoid her cooking, which was becoming mentally exhausting. As the visits to my in-laws grew increasingly burdensome, my mother-in-law continued to call frequently, looking forward to our next visit. "Is it summer break next? I can't wait for it to get warmer." While I felt utterly fed up, I casually responded, "Spring will be here before you know it," dreading the countdown until our next obligatory visit. As busy days went by, summer break quickly approached, and we were due for another family visit to the in-laws. When we arrived, my mother-in-law greeted my husband and son enthusiastically at the door. "Welcome, Patrick, Alex," but she barely made eye contact with me. I couldn't understand why she would insist on inviting someone she disliked. Although she was still cold to me, she continued to dote on our son, which was enough for me. My son, excited to share his catch from a fishing trip with friends, brought shrimp as a gift for his grandmother. "Grandma, I caught these shrimp recently. It was my first catch, so I saved them to bring to you," he said as he handed them to her. Delighted, she exclaimed. "Oh, did Alex catch these? Amazing. Thank you." And happily took the shrimp to the kitchen. Usually eating only mountain harvested foods, my mother-in-law was thrilled with the shrimp, a rare treat for her. Gifts from family were always appreciated, but something directly from her grandson seemed especially precious. I was relieved to see her smile. As she began preparing dinner, I followed her into the kitchen, boldly suggesting, "Mother-in-law, would you like some help cooking? I really enjoyed the meal last time and would love to learn your family recipes." While part of my intention was to learn from her culinary skills, my main goal was to ensure she didn't use eggs in my portion. However, my strategy fell flat as she promptly refused, saying, "I prefer to do the housework alone. I don't like my routine being disrupted, so please rest." Reluctantly backing down to avoid further annoyance, I left the kitchen. Once again, the atmosphere between us turned awkward. I planned to find an excuse not to eat dinner that evening. While pondering this, my mother-in-law approached and said, "Nicole, I'm sorry for scaring you with the egg dishes last time. I've been told off by Patrick because you always eat just pickles. I've made something different for you today, so it's safe. Eggs are definitely not included, so please eat with peace of mind." After saying that a bit abruptly, my mother-in-law quickly went back to the kitchen. Although I felt happy, I still couldn't trust her with the food, so I pretended to eat, saying, "Thank you for making a separate dish just for me. I'll enjoy it." And then discreetly passed it to my husband to eat. "It doesn't taste like eggs." My husband muttered softly, making sure his mother couldn't hear. Just to be sure, he went to check the kitchen and saw my mother-in-law taking a break, pulling tea out of the fridge. Seeing my husband, she casually mentioned, "Are you hungry? I'm about to make something for you and Alex, so just wait a bit." Then my husband exclaimed, "Ah, I found it." Rushing to the kitchen, I saw what he had discovered, eggshells that were clearly not yet dried, suggesting recent use. My husband was furious, confronting her. "Mom, what is this about? Did you put eggs in Nicole's dish again?" She seemed panicked, clearly not expecting to be caught. "No, it's not what you think. Those were from this morning. They have nothing to do with Nicole's dinner," she tried to bluff. However, I had checked the kitchen before she started preparing dinner, and knew there had been no eggshells then. "Please, just be honest with me. The kitchen was spotless before you started cooking, wasn't it?" I pressed. Finally resigning to the truth, she began to admit slowly, "I'm sorry. I thought if you could see the eggs, you wouldn't eat it. So I mixed them in without making them noticeable." Hearing this, I was too shocked to speak. The detail she described next was horrifying. She had minced the eggs into very fine pieces and mixed them into the meat, then colored it with sauce to conceal them completely. It saddened me deeply to realize she despised me enough to go to such lengths. Instead of showing remorse, she retorted, "It's rude not to eat what someone has prepared." With the atmosphere at dinner being incredibly tense, I realized it was pointless to argue further. I resigned myself to eating the shrimp Alex had brought, grateful for something other than pickles. Alex's shrimp are delicious. It's amazing that he caught such tasty shrimp. I attempted to lighten the mood. However, my shrimp-loving mother-in-law snatched my shrimp to eat herself, leaving Alex silent and upset. I felt terrible for ruining what could have been a pleasant time. I wondered if staying silent would have been better, overwhelmed with guilt. my frustration with her repeated attempts to feed me egg dishes, and the constant vigilance to protect myself had left me exhausted. My husband, having witnessed all this, suggested we leave. As we prepared to go, about an hour after dinner, my mother-in-law suddenly started vomiting and began shaking violently, with hives appearing all over her body. My son was crying, and my husband was shocked. But I quickly called an ambulance, suspecting an allergic reaction. At the hospital, it was confirmed that she had developed a severe allergy to shrimp. Fortunately, she wasn't in grave danger. But the incident had taken its toll on her energy. I asked her why she had tried so hard to hide eggs in my food, and she confessed she had thought my egg allergy was merely a dislike. She believed that hiding eggs in other foods would help me gradually get used to them and cure the allergy. She proudly recalled how she had helped Patrick overcome his dislike of vegetables by mixing them into dishes when he was younger. Frustrated with her confusion between dislikes and allergies, I arranged for her to hear directly from a doctor about the dangers of allergies. Can allergies really be cured by eating more of the allergen? When I asked the doctor, he looked me straight in the eyes and said, "Indeed, some people may outgrow their allergies, but this is mostly in cases involving children. There is a treatment method that involves gradually increasing the amount one can eat, but it should always be done under a doctor's supervision, with great caution. Moreover, in cases of severe allergies, it is extremely dangerous to eat the allergen based on one's own judgment." Glancing over at my mother-in-law, I noticed she was looking down guiltily, but I felt relieved that she finally understood. Following this, the doctor continued to educate her about allergies, and she truly began to comprehend their danger for the first time. Particularly impactful were the doctor's words. Deliberately making someone with an allergy eat the allergen is akin to attempted murder. The actions you've taken cannot simply be dismissed as disciplining your daughter-in-law or correcting dislikes. What you've been doing was essentially trying to kill your daughter-in-law multiple times. These words seemed to deeply resonate with her, marking a significant change in her understanding and attitude. In the hospital room, my mother-in-law apologized to me, saying, "I'm truly sorry for saying that you were just being fussy for not eating. I'm sorry for not researching allergies after hearing about your egg allergy. Now that I've experienced the terror of an allergy myself, I understand how serious it is, and I promise I will never try to make you eat eggs again." Experiencing these symptoms, which were the worst I've ever felt, has helped me truly understand how you feel. Having developed a severe shrimp allergy, which led her to vomit and almost faced death, she expressed regret for her past actions and apologized. Since then, my mother-in-law's harassment has stopped. This change was largely due to my son witnessing me suffering after eating egg dishes, which shocked him significantly. As a result, he grew distant from his grandmother, and we no longer visit my mother-in-law's house. I still find it hard to forgive her for everything she has done, so I feel it's okay not to visit for the time being. My mother-in-law occasionally calls and says, "It's very hard not being able to eat my favorite shrimp. Now, I have to check all my meals to make sure they don't contain shrimp." I didn't realize how difficult allergies could be, and she keeps apologizing. If she truly changes her attitude, I might consider visiting again. But for now, my priority is caring for my son, who had to witness his family members suffer from allergic reactions twice.